So I always like to start presentations like this just to get a sense for where all of y'all are. How many of you are users of Khan Academy in some way? Oh, that's good. How many of you have kids that use it? And, even more. And how many of you have no idea what Khan Academy is? Good. Okay, I'm going to be talking to you. That's our... So as a lot of y'all know, Khan Academy is associated with videos that I started making for some family, and now we have, and we have other people making now. But hopefully over the course of this talk, we'll see that it's much more than just videos, and the videos are actually just a small part of what we do. But just to get everyone on the same page, I will start with this montage of videos.
Of these interactions are just due to the gravity.
This is an age right after Isaac Newton.
I'm told the humidity makes it feel hotter. Why is this?
Excellent question, LeBron.
And you can just see the pleasure he had.
Can you determine which light bulb is being switched?
Things actually can interbreed, although for these two in particular, it seems like the mechanics would get kind of difficult.
And I can keep playing around with these numbers and see what kind of colors I can come up with.
If this does not blow your mind, then you have no emotion.
I didn't know y'all would appreciate Euler's identity that much. But as mentioned, much more than just videos. This is our computer science platform, really, with the key of showing students the creative side of computer science. They can create things, they can save them in portfolios, share them with their friends, get feedback. And we have anyone from pre-K students writing code on this all the way to people using it to write their PhD thesis. So it's kind of showing the project base or the kind of the creative side of computer science and mathematics. This is, I would say, the meat of the Khan Academy experience, and I'll talk more about it, but it's, I've always thought that the way that you really learn something isn't just through something like videos, it's by actually doing things, by doing exercises, getting feedback. And so what this system is the students go on, they take a diagnostic based on where they are, they can select a mission, the missions are aligned to state standards, and then it'll work through them at their own time, at their own pace. And there's some fairly sophisticated statistical modeling behind the scenes, so the system is trying to predict what's the next best exercise for the student that's going to push them down their learning curve as fast as possible. And clearly there's a bunch of game mechanics and whatever else there. This is just a snapshot of where Khan Academy is now. And I'll talk a little bit about how all this started. So these are, frankly, surreal numbers for me. It's being used in every country to some degree, over 300,000 registered educators using it, 10 million monthly unique users, 1 million in formal settings, 9 million in non-formal settings, and they've done 2 billion exercises. They do about 5 to 6 million exercises per day, and we'll talk more about that as well. But before I go into all of that, I'll tell you a little bit of how all of this started, and I have a feeling some of you are somewhat familiar with this, but it gives a lens on maybe what we're about and where we're going. If you rewind almost exactly 10 years, I was an analyst at a small hedge fund in Boston, and I was a year out of business school, had just gotten married, and had some family visiting me from New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And it just came out of conversation. My 12-year-old cousin was having trouble in math. When I asked her about it, it was unit conversion. So I offered, when she goes back to New Orleans, that I would tutor her over the phone, and she agreed. And that unit conversion was keeping her, they had actually placed her into a slower math track because she had done so badly on a placement exam. And so starting August 2004, I started working with Nadia every day after school for her, after work for me. It took a little time, but after about a month, she actually got unit conversion, got up to speed with her class, and frankly got a little bit ahead of the class. And at that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. And so I called up her school, and I said, I really think Nadia Reimagined should retake that placement exam from last year. They said, who are you? I explained I'm her cousin. And somewhat surprisingly, they allowed her, and then she actually not only got into the normal math track, she got into the advanced math track. And so I was pretty excited. So I started working with her younger brothers as well. And then over the next 2 years, a couple of things happened. One, word got around in the family that free tutoring was going on. And so I found myself with about 10 or 15 cousins, family, friends every day after work. And I also started writing some software for my family, because I saw that they all had their gaps in knowledge. Even if they were in 9th grade, some of them were a little bit foggy with decimals or exponents or whatever else. And so that was the actually original Khan Academy. It had absolutely nothing to do with videos. It was an exercise. It was a quizzing platform. And I created reports so that I, as their teacher, could see what were they working on, when were they working on it, what were their strengths, what were their weaknesses. And I was showing all of this off at a dinner party in 2006 to some friends. They all knew I had this crazy project. And one of my friends, Zuli Ramzan, I need to give him full credit, said, well, this is all great, Sal, but how are you actually scaling up your lessons, your tutorials? And I told him I'm actually not. What I was able to do one-on-one with Nadia when it was just a few cousins, I can't do now with 10 or 15. Sometimes I cover one concept, and then the next week I have to cover it again with another cousin. And so Zuli said, well, I have an idea. Why don't you just make some of your lessons as videos and upload them on YouTube? And I said, no, that's a horrible idea. YouTube is for cats playing piano. It is not for serious mathematics. But I went home that weekend, got over the idea that it wasn't my idea, and I decided to give it a shot. And I made first few videos on just concepts that I saw that I had to explain over and over and over again to my cousins. Negative exponents, adding fractions with unlike denominators, whatever it might be. And after a few weeks, I had 30 or 40 of these. I started telling my cousins to watch them at their own time, at their own pace. And then when we got on the phone, I could answer their questions. And after a little while, I asked for their feedback. And they somewhat famously and backhandedly told me that they liked me better on YouTube than in person. And on some level, it seems counterintuitive. And I think it's very important to parse what they were saying. They weren't saying that they didn't appreciate having me in their life, coaching them, mentoring them, kind of looking at what their strengths and weaknesses and guiding them. They really did appreciate that. But what they were saying is that when you learn something, and we've all experienced this, the first time you're learning something, and something that's actually pretty challenging, the last thing that you necessarily want is someone waiting for you to learn it. Hey, do you understand this yet? Even if they're not judging you and they're well-intentioned, it's stressful. And so now my cousins could, if they were a little bit foggy on something that they should have learned or they needed a review, they can just do it by themselves. No one, no judgment. But if they still were confused, they had me as a resource, and frankly, they had each other as resources. So I just kept going, making more and more and more content, more and more videos, and it soon became clear that people who were not my cousins were watching. And comments started to come in. Some of them, those early comments were, as simple as "thank you," and even that was a big deal. I don't know how much time you spend on YouTube. Most of the comments are not "thank you." They are. But then I started getting comments from folks. This is why I was able to pass my algebra class. This is why, going back to college, I was able to place out of remedial math, and I was able to place into calculus. This is, these videos helped me after retiring from the military. I hadn't seen math for 15 years. I was able to get up to speed and then go back and be an engineering major. I remember, this was, I think, 2007, so it's still pretty early days. I'd been doing this for about 6 months at this point. I got this letter, and I brought my wife over. I was like, this is incredible. There was this mother who wrote that all of her sons had a learning disability, and these videos were the only way that they could keep up with their class. And because of that, her and her entire family were praying for me and my entire family every night. And you can imagine how strange that was for me. I was an analyst at a hedge fund. I wasn't used to people praying for me. It was a very, at least in that way. So I just kept going. You fast forward to 2009. This hobby kind of took over my life. I frankly had trouble focusing on anything else. Set it up as a not-for-profit, quit my job, and kind of just saying, well, surely, this is a social venture where the social return on investment is really off the charts. It scales. It could reach millions. I mean, back then it was reaching about 100,000, but it could reach millions, and one day hundreds of millions or billions of people. And so I quit my job, but I think like all efforts like this, you start a little bit maybe overly optimistic. And 9 months into it, I still hadn't found any way to kind of support it. I was living off of savings, and our son had just been born, so it got pretty stressful. And I was getting $10, $20 donations off of PayPal. If it was any of you, thank you. But just as I was getting, frankly, pretty stressed, all of a sudden a $10,000 donation came in. And so I saw who it was. Her name was Ann Doer. She was local. She was in Palo Alto. By this point, I was based in Northern California. And so I immediately emailed her, and I said, thank you so much. This is the most generous donation that Khan Academy has ever received. If we were a physical school, you would now have a building named after you. And Anne replies back, well, I'd love, I'm a fan. I use the site. I use it with my daughters. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. And so Anne and I met a few days later over lunch, and she said, what's your goal? And I said, well, when you fill out to be a 501c3, the IRS, part of the form has mission, and then gives you like a line and a half. And I filled out a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And Anne said, well, that's ambitious. How do you plan on doing that? And I explained to her, I was like, this is a mission statement. I don't expect to just check it off tomorrow and then move on to healthcare or something. But I think we can make a lot of progress here. And I showed her, I had like a stack of letters that I had gotten from users. I showed her the usage, how it was growing. I showed her a lot of the analytics that I was doing even then to kind of help make the experience better. I showed her screenshots of the software that I had been working on for my cousins. And Anne said, you've somewhat surprisingly made a lot of progress. I only have one question. How are you supporting yourself? And in as proud of a way as possible, I said, I'm not. And so Anne kind of processed that. We part ways, and right 10 minutes later, I'm going into my driveway, and I get a text message from Anne, and it says, you really need to be supporting yourself. I've just wired you $100,000. So that was a good day. That was and then it frankly was the beginning of crazier and crazier events. A month later, I was running a little summer camp at a local middle school. Really, I've never viewed things like Khan Academy or these videos or these exercises as a replacement for a physical school. I view it as the opposite. I view it as something that can allow the physical experience to get to the next level, where it's not based on lecture anymore. It's not based on students sitting passively, but it can become more interactive. And so I was running a little summer camp to kind of experiment. What can you do with the physical classroom if it's not based on lecture anymore? And so I was in the middle of a simulation. I had 6 kids playing a game of Risk, and then I had the other 20 students trading securities based on the outcome of the game of Risk. Good game. And then while that was happening, I start getting some text messages from Anne, which you can imagine I now take very seriously. And they were coming in, and they were hard to read, but they read along the lines of, I'm at the Aspen Ideas Festival in Aspen, Colorado. I'm in the main pavilion. Bill Gates on stage, last 5 minutes talking about Khan Academy. So I didn't know what to make of this, so I immediately boot the nearest 7th grader off of a computer, and I start looking for some evidence of this event, and it didn't take me long. I found the footage. It was Walter Isaacson, head of the Aspen Institute, who you now saw is starting to do some history videos for us, interviewing Bill Gates, and he just asked him, what are you excited about? And he started about, the Khan Academy, how he uses it with his children, how he uses it himself. And so you can imagine how I felt. It was like a dream. It was surreal that this was happening. But actually my next reaction was I got nervous. Those videos were for Nadia, not Bill Gates, because I don't want to look at what I did. And then I, and then I didn't know what do I do next? What's the protocol? Do I call him? And they left me in that limbo state for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I get a call right as I'm about to record a video from Seattle. I answer it. Hello? Hi, this is Larry Cohen. I'm Bill Gates' chief of staff. You might have heard that Bill's a fan. I said, yeah, I heard that. If you're free over the next few weeks, we'd love to fly you up to Seattle and learn more about what you're doing and see if there's ways that we might be able to work with you. And I was looking at my calendar for the month, completely blank. So I said, yeah, I could have to cut my nails, but I think I can meet Bill Gates. So had that meeting, very similar to the meeting with Anne. Right around the same time, some folks from Google reached out. What would you do if you I didn't even know, but apparently a lot of the senior team at Google was already using Khan Academy with their children, and they said, we love this, we want to help you scale. What would you do if you had more resources? Told them the same thing that I told Anne. And so, long story short, by fall of 2010, kind of the stars aligned, and the Gates Foundation and Google were the first 2, I guess, major supporters to allow Khan Academy to become a real organization, get office space, start hiring up a team. And since then, we've had many others, and we're always looking for more. But just to get a sense of what we started really focusing on is the interactive portion of Khan Academy. And as I started this talk saying how the videos are a small part of what we do, 80% of our team is actually working on this, not on videos. And this is an extension of that software that I started, I guess you could say, prototyping or working on for my cousins. And this picture is what we call our knowledge map. But it's no longer a primary navigational interface, but it shows how we think about at least learning the core of mathematics. And as you saw, the videos go much broader. This is right now only math, but our goal is to, over time, focus on all major subjects. So each of those circles are a concept in math. At the top is basic addition, 1 plus 1 equals 2. And as you go down that graph, at the bottom you go all the way down to college level calculus and statistics. And the idea is, as you master one concept, you then move to the more advanced concepts. You got basic addition, now you go to more advanced addition, and now you go to basic subtraction, and you just keep going on and on and on. And on some level, that's common sense. That's the way that you would progress through a video game. You keep working on the level 1 until you beat the boss, then you go to level 2. It's the way you would learn a martial art. You keep working on your white belt skills until you master it, and then you become a yellow belt. But what we always point out is that this is not the way that a traditional school model works. A traditional school model, we group students together, usually by age, and then usually around middle school age and perceived ability. And this model that I'm describing, this isn't the way it was always done. This actually came out of 18th and 19th century Prussia. It's a kind of an industrial revolution-based model. But then we batch these students together, we move them together at a set pace. And what typically happens is, let's say there's a given unit that our class is in. Let's say it's basic exponents. Students will come to class, they'll review a little bit of homework, they'll get a lecture, they'll go home, they'll do more homework, they'll come back, review, lecture, homework. They do that cycle for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then there's a test. And on that test, maybe I get an 80%, maybe you get a 90%, maybe you get a 70%. And even though the test has identified those gaps, the person who got the 60 or 70% didn't know 30 or 40% of the material. Even the A student with the 95%, what was that 5% they didn't know? Even though the test identified that gap, those gaps, the whole class then moves on to the next concept. Probably something that's going to build on those gaps, like negative exponents or fractional exponents or logarithms. And to understand on some levels how strange this is, imagine if we did other things in our life that way. Say home building. So you bring in the contractor, and you say, we've been told we have 3 weeks to build the foundation. Do what you can. So maybe it rains, maybe some of the supplies don't show up. They do what they can. 3 weeks later, inspector comes. Concrete's still wet there. That part's not quite up to code. I'll give it an 80%. And you say, oh, great, that's a C. Let's build the first floor. Same process. We have 2 weeks. Do what you can. After 2 weeks, inspector comes in. I give it a 75%. Okay, great, let's build the second floor. Same process continues. And then all of a sudden, while you're building the 4th floor, the whole thing collapses. And to look at that, if our reaction to that is the reaction that we often have in education, we'd say, oh, maybe we needed more inspection or better inspection, or maybe something was wrong with the contractor. But what was really wrong was the process. The real problem was that we were artificially constraining how long to work on something, pretty much ensuring a variable outcome. When we identified the deficiencies, we just kind of viewed it as a value judgment, I guess, on the building, and then we just moved on to the next floor. And so what we say is, instead of doing it that way, instead of holding fixed how long and when the student has to learn something, and the variable being A, B, C, D, F, and those grades are really just as a value judgment, oh, you're a C student, you're a D student, you're a B student, do it the other way around. Expect that every student should get to mastery of basic exponents before they're expected to learn negative exponents or fractional exponents. And then what's variable is when and how long they get to learn the concepts. So this is our, and I know this is, and I think the next panel right after me is going to talk a lot more in depth about this. We started off, as I just told you, as kind of this thing, as for my cousins, it was this supplementary thing. People were finding us on the internet. But very quickly, especially after we became a real organization in 2010, a bunch of school districts started reaching out to us. How could we use this in the classroom? And that was always a dream of mine. That, I started off as kind of a pseudo teacher for my cousins. And so I showed them the teacher dashboards. I said every student could learn at their own pace, master concepts. Class time could be much more about problem solving, about peer tutoring, about doing projects, about doing explorations, whatever it might be. And so over the last 4 years, we've only invested more and more and more in kind of becoming, I guess, what you could call an enterprise-grade tool. And so what you see here are the different missions that you can select on Khan Academy. And these missions, going all the way from early math, which is K through 2 math, all the way through differential calculus, and we just added integral calculus, these are completely standards aligned. These are all aligned with the Common Core, and not just a superficial mapping. I think a lot of the, whatever side of the Common Core debate people are on, I think a lot of the negative has been that standards are what they are, but people oftentimes criticize the implementation. And a lot of times there's been kind of a knee-jerk, quick remapping of old content, or just kind of a very superficial, let's use the words that the standards use for the new content, which leads to kind of a superficial implementation. We've essentially redone all of our content, working in conjunction with the authors of the Common Core to make this as close to the spirit of what the Common Core is about as possible. And they haven't worked with any too many people like this because we are a free resource, we are not for profit. They wanted this to be out there so people can understand what the Common Core is about. And so each of those missions, if a student picks the 4th grade mission or the 8th grade mission, within that context, they will learn at their own pace. It'll build any foundations, any gaps that will be filled in that they might have been accumulating as they went through this traditional model. And our goal is as they finish it, the teacher can feel very confident that the student will do just fine on the end of year assessments. And if they can look at our content and by standards themselves, they can search by the standards. And when I say they should do just fine, we are actually talking to the major parties. Smarter Balance is obviously one of the 2 consortia that are building the assessments for the Common Core. Illustrative Mathematics was founded by Bill McCollum, who's one of the authors for the Common Core. And they're actually reviewing our items to make sure that they are consistent with what the Common Core is about. So all of this is another way of saying is that we're very serious about not just mapping to the Common Core, but trying to make the best implementation of the Common Core possible. And a lot of people ask, what is that trade-off between having tests and making sure that the classroom doesn't become essentially just test prep? And my belief on this is, yes, tests you do need to measure at some point, but ideally, if students can learn at their own time, own pace, you can arm the teacher with data that if the teacher says, okay, I have my students working on the 5th grade mission, this is where they are, some students are doing just fine, some students are having a little trouble, I can do a focused intervention with them. But as long as I feel confident that they're progressing, that liberates me from having to do test prep. That liberates me from having to worry too much about all of these new tests, and I can focus my day more so than ever on what I always wanted to do, on projects and explorations and whatever else. This is a dashboard that just gives a view of how it could be used by a teacher. We have probably 50 of these dashboards that shows different information for the teacher in different ways. But this one, you could conceptualize a classroom like this, where each column there is one of the concepts in the knowledge map. Each row there is a student in the class. So you can kind of view this as a spreadsheet. And each cell shows how well that student has learned that information based on the statistical models that our system is running. So the depth of blue is how much the student has mastered it, and the red shows that student is stuck. And so a teacher can walk in every day, it updates in real time, and say, okay, look, there's those 3 students who are having trouble in solid geometry. Everyone else seems to be doing fine. I could do a focused intervention with them. Or even better, I can get one of the students who have already mastered it to peer tutor their friends or their classmates. And if they see, look, most of my class is doing pretty good at square roots of perfect squares, well, that liberates me. I can now do an interesting project feeling confident that they have the skills necessary to engage properly with that project. This is some data from a charter school in Oakland, California, underserved area. And I want to preface, I don't want to give anyone the false impression that Khan Academy can just be airdropped into a classroom and then all of a sudden the butterflies will fly and the flowers will bloom. And it's a tool, and it's only going to be as effective as how it's used, like any tool, like chalk or a chalkboard. And the results I'll talk about in a second, I give the great majority of the credit to the head teacher there, Peter McIntosh, who's always, before we even existed as a tool, he was always looking for a way to do this mastery-based learning, to do competency-based learning, to give his students more ownership over their learning. And so this was a ninth grade algebra class that in 2010 was in the 22nd percentile in the state of California. A lot of these students 2-3 years behind grade level. And in 2011, they started using Khan Academy. And they've gone in 2010 from the 22nd percentile to 2013, the 99th percentile, where there's only 9 ninth grade algebra classrooms in the entire state that are outperforming this ninth grade algebra classroom. And what Peter always tells us, and it's amazing how he communicates it. He's really opened up my mind to it. He's like, the test scores are great. That seems to be what everyone cares about. But he views that and the math is really just a pretext. The more powerful thing that's happened to these students is that they've started to take ownership over their learning. That traditionally they came in, teacher, what do I need to know? You give them a problem, they'll look at it for 5 seconds. Oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm not good at math. It was more, hey, teacher, is this going to be on the test? Oh, teacher, are you going to make this test hard? Are you going to try to flunk us? And so it was this antagonistic relationship. But when you allow them to work at their own pace, allow them to set their own goals, allow them to work on some gaps in their knowledge. There were ninth graders who didn't know their multiplication tables. Allow them to work on their gaps in their knowledge that will allow them to build a foundation to succeed later on. All of a sudden, they took ownership. And when they take ownership, then the teacher becomes a resource, not an adversary. Their peers become a resource. And when they take ownership, that affects not just their math scores, but frankly, all their scores. And I think any of us as parents or any, for our own children, that's what we would want. It's nice to learn how to factor a polynomial. It's even more important to take ownership over your learning for the rest of your life. Now, everything I've talked about so far has just been in formal settings, but to just get a sense of how much potential there is out there, if you just allow people to tap into it, I'll show this next video that we got last year.
So I actually dropped out of high school twice, both during my freshman year. And when I eventually came back, I was put in sort of lower level math and science classes because I was so behind. Then I discovered Khan Academy, and I was able to skip 2 years worth of math just through using the site. And I came into school, I took the exam with students who had been enrolled in the class all year, and I was actually able to get the highest or the second highest scores in the class. So for me, Khan Academy really changed the trajectory of my entire life, because without it, I don't think I ever really would have been inspired to learn and to love math and to love science. I ended up graduating as a valedictorian and going on to Princeton, where I'm now a computer science major, and I'm absolutely passionate about learning, about computers, about math, about science. And without Khan Academy, I don't think that these things would really matter to me the way that they do today. So I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everyone at Khan Academy, Saul and the team. Please keep doing the good work that you're doing, because you're really changing lives.
So there's a neat So when we found out that Charlie was a computer science major, we said, we have internships. And so he applied, and he actually did incredibly well on all the rounds. And so we gave him an offer, he accepted, and so he's just joined us 2 weeks ago as a summer intern at Khan Academy. So it's very exciting. We're solving our own labor problems. But it's exciting. Hopefully he can now work on Khan Academy and make it better for the next generation of Charlies. This is at least for me in the long history of Khan Academy, is probably maybe the most exciting partnership. As many of y'all know, the College Board announced 2 months ago that in 2016 they're going to launch a new SAT, much more aligned with what students are actually learning in school, much more aligned with kind of true college readiness. And as part of that, they've recognized that there's always been this inequity, or at least a perceived inequity and probably a real one, in terms of test prep. Middle class and affluent students can afford test prep, and even on the margin, if it's improving their scores, that's not fair. And so they've reached out to us, and I want to make it clear, this isn't like a superficial partnership on superficial test prep where it's, just, hey, here's the test, here's some test-taking strategies. They reached out to us because they genuinely believe that if you allow students to learn at their own pace, you allow them to build their foundations, you allow them to do essentially an infinite amount of deliberate practice with feedback and give their coaches, their teachers, their parents access to the data so that they can help keep the students motivated, that's what real test prep should be about. That's what real college readiness should be about. And so we're super excited about this. We're launching, we have some kind of preliminary resources right now, but in spring of 2015, we're going to launch kind of the full SAT preparation missions, which are really, it's going to be free, but what I always point out, it's going to be the best test prep out there that just happens to be free. And and obviously we'll hope that this will level the playing field just a little bit more. So everything I've talked about so far has been essentially our world, but some of y'all are probably curious about the rest of the planet. And so all of these are pictures of Khan Academy being used in the rest of the planet. We just get these pictures mailed in every day. We get it feels like we get some of these pictures. These are mainly other not-for-profits taking our work and taking it out into the field. And all of these are pretty exciting stories, but probably the most exciting one is the one in the top right. I used to say, who knows, maybe one day this will be used in Mongolia. And then I get a letter from Mongolia. And it was from the young woman on the top right, her name's Zaya, and she sent kind of an email and a video testimonial very similar to Charlie's. And I immediately, when I saw that, I said, oh, well, this is nice, but she must be middle class, upper middle class. She spoke English quite well. She had access to the internet. But then I read the text of the email a little bit closer, and it turned out that there were a group of engineers from Cisco Systems that were using their vacation time to go to Mongolia and set up computer labs with internet in orphanages. And so what you see in the top right, those are the actual orphan girls using Khan Academy, and Zaya was one of those orphans. And that by itself was pretty powerful and surreal for me and the team, but what's been even crazier since then, and it's actually very similar to Charlie's story, she's now become one of the top contributors of content in the Mongolian language. So gone completely full circle and benefited and then is giving back. So it's been pretty exciting. This is, from the get-go, even from that, I remember the first meeting with Google in 2010, one of the intentions, our mission is a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. So being international was very important to us. And frankly, being accessible to different language learners even in the US was very important to us. And so this past fall, we launched es.khanacademy.org in conjunction with the Carlos Slim Foundation and based in Mexico City. But it's everything you just saw in English, now in Spanish. The exercises, the dashboards, the teacher dashboards, the videos. And what's neat is you can even have in a classroom where you have some English learners in the US, you could have if English is holding them back, you could have them doing this version, but the teacher can get a common dashboard. So at least, ideally they would ramp up on the English, but at least the English won't hold them back in terms of them learning their mathematics. And to get a sense of what Khan Academy, and we're launched Brazilian Portuguese recently, we're going to launch Turkish, French, and hopefully all of the world's languages in the not too far future. But to get a sense of what this looks like in different languages, I'll show this video montage.
Me comí 2 quartos de pizza.
L'hypoténuse commune, ok.
7, 13, 15.
और मैं इस हाथ से इस ब्लॉक को धकेलने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ इस डायरेक्शन में.
توجد قطعتين من معدن النحاس والزنك.
P R به توان 2 ضرب داره.
הגיעה הנקודה שבה שוק הסיום של הזווית חותכת את מעגל היחידה.
ili muweze kuelewa na kuweza.
Une doktorluk kufuneka siyazi kukuba kubani
16 bölü 16 1'e eşittir.
Muitas e muitas outras coisas importantes.
I'm Zaya from Mongolia. Your videos are so interesting and funny. Make more lessons.
I watch that when I get lazy. Let's see. So these are just more pictures of Khan Academy being used around the planet. And what I tell everyone who's kind of involved, and I want to make it very clear, Khan Academy is much more than just me now. We're 60 full-time folks. That Common Core items that you saw, that's been done with nearly 100 educators, researchers, graduate students. Our AP Calculus that you saw, that's being done in conjunction with Phillips Andover, obviously one of the best kind of boarding schools probably on the planet. That's actually where the AP tests were invented, so we're making sure that we're not just free, but world-class, that every student is getting access to that level of rigor. We've had thousands of people help subtitle, translate. We obviously have 300,000 teachers who are using it in the classroom, giving us feedback, 10 million students who are kind of part of our community on a regular, actually 15 million on a regular basis. And what I tell everyone that I meet is, to me, this feels not like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This feels like a once-in-a-millennium opportunity, where you have this thing called education, this thing that has always been the determinant between the haves and the have-nots, but it's always been scarce. It's always been expensive. And our hope, and once again, it's not going to happen overnight, but over the next 5, 10, 20 years, I think we have a really powerful shot of working with government, working with teachers, working with schools, working with districts to kind of use these new tools so that we can start having every student learning at their own pace, having the master concepts, arming teachers so that they can liberate class time to doing more higher order activities, so that this thing called education can become more like clean drinking water or shelter and just become a fundamental human right. Thank you.